Managing forefront endpoint protection settings. Security. It's the boogeyman. It's also really important too. And it's one of those things where, I don't know, sometimes it makes me think that security is one of those very non-value added activities, or at least until the security problem happens. And unfortunately, when you're the security admin, you really don't get a lot of kudos, but you get a lot of opportunities for failure, right? You know, you can spend all day long trying to protect, but the one time that you make a mistake or you mess up or somebody beats you to the punch, well, you're going to get nailed because you didn't do your job. Baked into Config Manager, it's a separate license, but it's a part of Config Manager, is Microsoft's new forefront endpoint protection. And what this is essentially a consolidation of the forefront stuff with Config Manager as the delivery mechanism and the management mechanism. And this whole the consolidation of the security client with Config Manager brings you a lot of benefits over just dealing with the client all by itself. Now, the client's job is to detect and remediate all these bad things in the environment. And the client's job is also to manage Windows firewall settings. The client also takes care of automatically downloading these anti-malware definitions and updates. So its job is to handle all of the security stuff on that system. Well, when you layer Config Manager on top, what you get is some really nice policy settings distribution and management. You also can direct forefront clients to their updates and their definitions. So you have a much more fine-grained control over where your clients end up getting their updates and definitions. And you also get some better monitoring and reporting as well. So the consolidation of the two really creates a much better endpoint security environment for the machines that you're managing with Config Manager. Now, in this nugget, I'm going to show you kind of some of the real basics of installing the production point, configuring the client settings, and then configuring some of the policies that are out there. Once you set these things up, really the client does really most of the work in going and getting its definitions, in dealing with scanning the individual machines, and all the real scut work associated with managing that security. You can also here inside of Config Manager manually initiate scans, full scans, quick scans, or what have you, or even download definitions off of large numbers of clients at once. And really this manual initiation of scans is kind of powerful here because, well, it gives you the ability, when you know that you've got a problem, to set off a scan right away so that you can protect yourself and also protect yourself from all the bad news that tends to happen with we security admins. So we're going to spend some time here in this nugget really kind of understanding how we manage the client settings for forefront endpoint protection. First thing we have to do is actually get another site role installed onto our site server. So just like we've done innumerable times before, we've got to add in the site system role for the endpoint protection client. Notice that in order for you to use the endpoint protection client, well, you got to actually have all the WSS stuff set up first. That's why we're doing this after the Windows Update stuff. So one of the mechanisms that the client uses for actually gathering its bits and also some of the definition bits can happen as a function of WSS and a function of software updates here inside of Config Manager. So this warning box pops up to let you know that you have to have one before you can have the other. So in this next screen we have the endpoint protection license terms. As I said, there's a second license that's required here. And in fact, you can't see the checkbox here, but there's a click here to approve the license terms checkbox that's below the level of the screen here. If I choose next, I can choose the Microsoft Protection Service membership type. If you're familiar with some of the consumer level tools that Microsoft uses for security, you know that there's sort of a basic membership and an advanced membership where you can choose not to join at all. The advanced membership's a little bit down here. I'm going to choose basic membership here, and then next, and then finally close to actually install that role here onto this computer. With the role installed, as you can guess, well, what's our next step is to validate that the count of roles increases, and then to move over to our client settings. So here inside of our client settings, we have, where did it go? Endpoint protection right here, we have some of the basic client settings that are associated with Forefront endpoint protection. Now you'll notice that it's set to false by default, so we have to set this to true. The next options here instruct whether or not we want to install the endpoint protection client on those machines. The third item down here gives us the option of automatically removing any other anti-malware solution that may conflict with the endpoint protection client. So if I have another anti-malware solution, and you can pick the ones that are out there, and the Forefront endpoint protection client can recognize that it's existing on the system registered with Windows anti-malware solution, well, will it go about uninstalling that solution before it goes about installing itself? This is something you absolutely want to do, because having multiple solutions on the same computer is generally a bad idea. They can conflict with each other in their policies. So setting this to true, very important value here. Do you want to suppress computer restarts if it's installed, allow a period of time, and then do you want to disable alternative sources for the initial definition update? If I set this to true, then the client cannot actually use any of those alternate locations like Microsoft's Windows Update or WSUS or UNC shares. So setting this to false for that initial definition update can actually be useful if, for example, the client is somewhere out in the world that's not directly connected into your config manager infrastructure. Choose OK here. And this will go about actually distributing out those client settings out to the clients in this site. So with the settings now set, we have a couple of policies that we need to actually configure that determine what our anti-malware settings are, and also what our Windows firewall settings are. And those are going to be done here under Assets and Compliance in the Endpoint Protection node. So under Endpoint Protection, I have both the policies for Windows Firewall and anti-malware. And just like with the client policies, I have the ability to create a prioritized list of policies that I can then connect up with various computers or users. So if I have one set of users that I just know they're problem users and I want to turn on real-time scanning for those users, I can do that. I can turn on one set of users to do their full scan at one point in time, and another set of users at another point in time, or maybe the servers do theirs at a different time than the desktops do theirs. So this gives me that ability to have multiple different policies here, just like I had with setting those client settings. Now, when I actually take a look at the policy, there's a whole lot of stuff here that you're going to set up. If you've played with the client just by itself, the consumer client, then you're familiar with a lot of what these settings are. But Microsoft's client gets relatively rich in the settings that you can configure for how you want anti-malware to work on your systems. So when do I want to run scheduled scans, and what types, and what days, what times, these sorts of items here. What sorts of settings am I interested in? What types of scans am I interested in looking at, like email and archive files and network drives? Do I have any default actions that I want to do for different severity levels? What about real-time protection? Do I want to turn it on? And then if it's turned on, what sorts of behaviors do I want it to look for? Do I have any exclusions? Do I want to exclude out files and folders or processes or file types? You will generally come to learn what these are as you turn this on and figure out that certain different types of files or processes don't really work well with Microsoft's anti-malware solution. A couple of advanced settings here associated with restore points or notification messages, or allowing users to exclude files or processes. Do I want to override when I see certain threats? I can define for a specific threat name when that name exists. I haven't actually downloaded the threats here yet. When that exists, what sort of action do I want to do instead of the default action? Do I want to join the Microsoft Active Protection Service in either the basic advanced membership or not at all? And lastly, how do I want to handle definition updates? Now, as you see here, we can choose what the different sources are for those definition updates. And they can come from Config Manager, they can come from WSUS, Microsoft's Update, or even Microsoft's Malware Protection Center. If I want, I can also do a UNC file share here and set the path with this item down here at the bottom. So lots and lots of flexibility here in terms of defining what that default anti-malware policy is going to be for your environment. And this is one of those things where the best practice is really whatever suits your specific needs. If you don't like real-time protection on your servers. Well, don't turn it on. You have the flexibility to do that with these multiple policies. If you do want your scans to occur at a faster value than once a week, you can do that. The flexibility all exists here inside of this policy. Now, a little bit less granular are the Windows firewall policies. And the notion here is that these firewall policies can give you essentially the same sorts of items that you would get from deploying policies via group policy. But here we're doing it with Config Manager as part of Forefront Protection. If I create a Windows firewall policy, and I just call it my policy here, you'll see that I can enable Windows Firewall if I want for the domain profile or for the private or public profile. And then what do I want to do as far as blocking incoming connections or notifying the users? There's actually a number of additional settings that's below the level of this screen that gives you even more granular control. But the notion here is that I can actually manage the firewall in the same place that I manage all the other security settings for these computers. When I'm done, choose Next and Finish to actually deploy out this policy. I'm not going to deploy this policy here for now. So these are the settings that you have to be aware of for really dealing with Forefront. Now, from time to time, you may actually need to manually initiate a scan. Hey, we know that there's some big problem. We think it might be in the network, and we don't want to actually wait until next Wednesday morning when we do our next manual scan or our next full scan. Let's actually go and request all the clients to just go ahead and do a scan right now so that I can see that if I'm protected or not. I can do that actually here under Device Collections. So let me choose the All Systems collection here as an example. Under All Systems, I can choose the collection item up here, and then Endpoint Protection, and then I can choose either Full Scan, Quick Scan, or I can tell the clients to actually download the most recent definitions. So, big problem occurs, no need to worry about asking your users to do things. You can actually enforce these scans right here from within this console. So, useful tool. Now, obviously, there's going to be some reporting that you might want to be aware of. And the reporting node, just like all the different nodes, has plenty of different reports in here that relate to Forefront Endpoint Protection. I have, let's see here, it looks like a good 6 reports that relate to the different items that Forefront is actually collecting. But in addition to just this report is also this System Center 2012 Endpoint Protection status. So this gives me kind of a heads-up display, a dashboard, if you will, that relates to the status of endpoint protection in my environment. Right now, I haven't actually deployed out any active clients. The clients haven't received their policy, so they haven't begun the installation of the Forefront Protection client yet. So I don't actually have any values in here, but I will slowly begin to get those values as my clients, my Config Manager clients, begin receiving their policy. When I have that, I can find out more information about the malware that's been remediated, where a full scan has been required, my top 5 malware items for different computers, and just the kinds of warm, fuzzy information that I want to ensure that I've got all the best knowledge about the security posture for the computers in my environment. So pay particular attention to this and make use of this dashboard because, well, it will provide you exactly that information you need to show that you're actually doing the best you can in terms of protecting your environment against all the baddies that are out there. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about Forefront Protection and how we can leverage the tools that exist inside of Configuration Manager to handle policy distribution and management, to deliver the updates and definitions to clients, and actually to monitor and report those clients on the behaviors of those clients as well. We spent some time talking about all the nifty things that the endpoint protection client can do and the very deep level of granularity that I have in managing those behaviors. And then in the interaction portion, we spent some time installing the endpoint protection point, configuring those client settings, configuring a few policies, and showing where it becomes very easy then to manually initiate scans and download those definitions. Coming up next, we are going to shift focus from the machines in our environment over to the mobile devices in our environment. You know, in an environment or in a world where we have more people that are connecting up to corporate resources via mobile devices, it becomes really important for us to understand how we can manage the inventory of those devices and control a few of the settings as well. That next nugget is going to be fairly interesting for you, especially if you have a lot of ActiveSync devices that are connecting up into your world. But until then, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.